아래 당도 요게 상이기 다 또 캠베윤다 제외윤데 제외윤데 제사 심지엔 탐제 다 고아 레녀 레다 녀모 온거 고아는 얘기가 심지엔데 녀모배 상황도 송제 라와메바 아니 지게 령하게 제주디 도슈구레스 디나신다 상이세디 다투 캠베윤 제외윤데 원거 투니지 캠베 원게다 심지엔이야 근데 라와메 바는 젠리아 심젠리아 지 동안 줘야다 디기드에 탑람 쉐텐데 샬레 팬더 주고레스 어dan도 되시게 안다 또 캠비 제외인데 것이 살지.
Good afternoon. This morning then we looked at the excellent qualities of the Buddha's compassion, having last night looked at the excellent quality of his exalted knowing. So this is part of the overall section where we're looking at the incredible qualities of the Buddha jewel presented through the qualities of his body, speech, and now mind. So the Buddha, through his exalted knowing, knows all phenomena, which means he understands perfectly each individual being's suffering, as well as the causes for their suffering, as well as the ideal solutions and how best for each individual to implement them. And so that's the exalted knowing. And through the great compassion, the Buddha is compelled to help beings, to guide beings to attain a state of freedom. Now we'll continue in the text, looking at the excellent qualities of the Buddha's, and this is more commonly translated as enlightened activities. The excellent qualities of the Buddha's enlightened activities in the handout, the top of page 123, and in the published book, the middle of page 105. When we look at the qualities of Buddhas, we look at their qualities through in four different ways. The qualities of the Buddha's body, the qualities of the Buddha's speech, the qualities of the Buddha's mind, and that we just looked at with the two components, that of wisdom and compassion. And now we come to the fourth quality of Buddhas, that is their enlightened activities.
상예기 근데 남켄기 상예 투유기 남켄기 that 규제발라 때네 중위기 연대식들아 다 틀리게 연대세 그래.
The enlightened activities of a Buddha come about independent, or they follow from, or maybe you can say they're caused by the omniscient consciousness of the Buddha. So the omniscient consciousness of the Buddha is what leads to the enlightened activities of Buddhas.
제자답변에 상예기 남켄 독자와 첨보, 독자와 첨보 투지의 원계 군의 라제 군론 투지의 원계 다 제위 투지의 원계 아니 현리야 군론 유디다 투지자와 첨보 상유 투자와 첨보 남켄제 디 원계는 현리야 쉐된바다 아니 류유구유권에 아니 구이 남규때 아니 송구권에 쉐된바 되는 거로 봐. 그래서 진례리다. 상예기 진례기 침신례. 상예기다 투니지 왕게 군녀라제 현심절이야. 아니 쉐된바 쉐송야 저로와 대송디 가르레 규가를 때는 와서는 상예기 그런 투 아니 남게 제외 왕로 중화로와 제사다 디 진례리. 상예기 되네게는 현 판도 치도 아니 현동화 세야된 디규주에 된다로 꾸인 넘바 돼야 저러와 디스에 상예기 틀려야 틀려야 제사다 가서 유 남게 지게 군녀라 안데 상예기 되네게 최대의 틀려시 zeba cherwada. Da sanyi ge lam nyamlen che rimba ten du ngarang zuge sanyi jesu rangje lam nyamlen che ne gewa jorwa diyan sanyi tinle chagore. Jesa sanyi tinle se de wuru chi. Sanyi ge chue ten ngarang zuge nyamlen che ne ngarang zuge gewa lam je dan gewa je jorwa da o di diyan sanyi tinle chagore. 남견라 라마라 동요 도페 쳔바요레 투니 산이 쳔바 차산 남견 시거와 제산 남견 산이기 데니기 남견 디기 규제발레 데네 준비 산이 코론 규기다 류나기 안에 제바 제제 산이 틀레레 데니게 산이 데니게 송발레 데네 안아주 냠네지 안아주 기회 냠네 깨야다 점로 깨야다 데네 소란다 고남 남규레 깨야다 차산 산이 틀레 제거래.
Through these two qualities of the Buddha's mind we've already looked at, his exalted wisdom and his great compassion, enlightened activities follow. So, for example, the Buddha, perceiving all sentient beings through exalted wisdom and under the power of his great compassion, wants to benefit. The expressions of benefit will be the enlightened activities. So there's a causal sequence with the enlightened activities being the expression of the omniscient consciousness. So the clearest illustration of the expression of enlightened activities is not the many miraculous deeds one hears about, but it's the teaching of the Dharma, the presenting of suffering and its causes, and the path by which one gains freedom from such suffering. This is the primary enlightened activity that Buddhas engage in so as to help beings. The expression of teaching comes about under the power of or by means of the omniscient consciousness, both the expression of great compassion and exalted wisdom.
Adonala da sanyi tinle se de ganesh ko sene sanyi yu namchen ji yu che bala tene rangi yu namchen di jinje 아 저게 다 라시아 상계 다 상계 많이 비교라 유팅의 계획이 차상 한다 상계 틀에 사지고 라고다 상계 틀에 세 되는 거 그래 제사 다 상계 틀에 세지 근데 라고서는 당보 상계기 남편이 군내라 남편이 견체네 규체 발에 때네 안에 중위기 개화되라 sanyi tinle la gore gewa de la di gewa di sanyi gyula koron gyula yore chanju simbu gyula yore manzo gyula yung gore jeza de sanyi tinle se de kane ko se ne gewa kare yimene de ne di sanyi ge dangbo sanyi gi namkin yu gyuje ne sanyi gyu tuknya namkin yu gyuje bala de ne ane jundu gen gewa dik de la ne sanyi tinle se gore da sanyi tinle se de ne ko gore da 다 그런 게 상계를 제수 자제 상계 손바디 롭든 제제 개와사는 상계 틀레 채거래. 제자다 상계이마 상계이 남kin이 군군여라제 규제발에 되는 중앙자 그런 상계를 대바제 상계이 최래 롭든 제도 아니 상계 구 가서 틀레 차대로 거래. 틀레 셈을 유그레스 나다 틀레 용고래서나 용고래 요래서 가지고 요래 땅 가지고 되니게 개와체에 개와디게 상이게 틀레 잡거래 그래서 된다라 상이 틀레 람나 상이게 틀레라도 상이 구유 틀레 숨게 투기 틀레라도 구송 투숨기 투기다 저 남편이 유제발에 되네 준디긴 개외릭들라 상이 틀레 남편이 유마제베 개와나 상이 틀레 잡고 말해 다제 남긴 유제발에 되는 준비게 랑기 유 남긴이 유제발에 되는 준비게 개어지라 다 가서래 남거게 연된치들라 아니 네 상이 틀에서 되는 시고 거다 상이 틀에서 제로지.
The enlightened activities of the Buddha can be performed by the Buddha's body, speech, or mind. But whether the enlightened activities of a Buddha are expressed by the body, speech, or mind, they are caused by the omniscient consciousness of the Buddha. So a being who lacks an omniscient consciousness, a non-Buddha, cannot engage in enlightened activities. Those who have omniscient consciousnesses, so Buddhas, their activities are a result of that omniscient consciousness. So whilst an enlightened activity may be expressed physically, verbally, or mentally by the Buddhas, it comes from, as maybe you could say, the foundational cause, that of the omniscient consciousness. And where enlightened activities are, I'm not sure of what verb to use, but maybe where they are experienced, the enlightened activities of Buddhas where they are experienced will be in the continuum of any being with an omniscient consciousness or without an omniscient consciousness. So in other words, the enlightened activities of the Buddhas are experienced by beings in terms of their accumulation of virtue through engaging in the Dharma. So therefore, the enlightened activities of the Buddhas result in the accumulation of virtue in the continuum of Buddhas and non-Buddhas.
지사 상기기 최송야디 담보 semjenle chue sonya de 가르친 송고라스는 semjen 탐조 동안은 자고 semjen 디기된 대바시 제고도 sem비 군로 삼로 되는 시어와다 투제원 인쳔보 여바죠. 제자다 뒤된발에 세제 탐지 캠비기 캠바 지다와 주는 된 리비 캠바 여바자 디기 캠바 디 견진에서 디 군에 라제 semjenle chue 송고라다 제자다 디니 군에 라제 semjenle chue 송비 갑라 아니 가브리엘에 주고 드라마라게 넘버 구송 류기 꾸디 넘버 드라마라 된 여러와다 디저는 꾸 류디게 아니 꾸디게 아니 꾸이칠레스 여러와다 데네 디나지 안 데네 송 데네 마송에게 송디게다 송게 칠레스 여러와다 안 데네기 다 데네 마송지네 데네게 상이게 최송제 다디 연대의 꾸다 송데 상이 그런 거를 이렇게 상이 칠레디제 다 데네게 상이 꾸리야 아주 제제 상이 송될 된 아주 될 대바제 상이 송될 퇴바제 삼바제 되니 상이 대바제도 아주게 대비게다 데네게 최냠내 제게 되는 겸로게 알아서 받아 장조심 니지 고미알아서 되네 삼로디게 차사 내 개월이디 가르친 중화에서는 상이기 최송와디 퇴바 냠내 될 때네 되어와 딜레바제 상기기 아니 투제와 침비기 제부차되어다 제부차되어 지금 대완자 상기기 투제와 침에 상기기 캠비기 제부인자 당랑규래 영랑주규래 유배 개와디 단 상기 침례리에제 말 송제난데 송제난거와 송제 당보 상기 송송구로와 상예 송례 퇴바 셰바게 퇴비 된들에 삼당 대바게 디 개와로와 디 가르친 레바체 상예 송델레티니 개와로와 데네게 대바게 데네 냠는지네 디 야야조도 가시길래 점로기야 자주심게 니지기야 아니 초람 곰놈게 용구로 어디 세상 상이 틀려서 그래서 상이 투 제위기 닝지 첨보 디기 제수 디기 제부레스 지차상 디 제부레 지자 상이 틀려서 그래서 델레 요래 당연히 요래다 상이 틀 요래다 델레 저와도 요래면 lep세네 지다 요래 세우러다 게 요래 세우러다 상이 틀려된 가지고 요래 게 요래
The primary or principal beneficial activity that Buddhas engage in is to teach the Dharma. And what is their motivation? What is their wish behind teaching the Dharma? It is due to the power of their compassion, conjoined with their wisdom, that they want beings to gain freedom from suffering and abide in the lasting state of happiness that Buddhas have attained. So this is what motivates Buddhas to teach the Dharma. And to do so, the Buddha will emanate emanations, so their physical bodies. And these physical emanations that are to engage with and benefit beings, for example, through teaching, will be physical enlightened activities, physical enlightened activities of the Buddhas. And then when they engage in the act of teaching beings, then this is an enlightened activity of speech of the Buddhas. So we see here from the omniscient consciousness, wanting to benefit beings, then the enlightened activities follow through expressions of the body, with physical enlightened activities through the various emanations appearing throughout the world, and enlightened activities of speech through the Buddha's teaching and guiding beings. So this is one part of the expression of enlightened activities to do with the Buddhas. Then, from the other perspective, the recipient of the Buddha's enlightened, physical and verbal enlightened activities. So these will be ordinary suffering beings like ourselves, or perhaps bodhisattvas, or even Arya beings. They will be the recipients of such enlightened activities. So let's say the Buddha, an emanation of the Buddha is teaching the Dharma. So this is an expression, a physical enlightened activity and a verbal enlightened activity. The being listening with openness and receptiveness and a degree of faith in the Buddha or in the teacher, in their mind, virtue is arising. And this virtue may arise in the form of a mind of refuge, or the generation of love or compassion, or the attainment of a path, or the further development of a path. So in other words, virtue is arising. And the virtue that's arising in the continuum of non-Buddhas, so the recipients of the teachings, that virtue is arising in dependence on the enlightened activities of the Buddha, and therefore it is said that the enlightened activities of the Buddha arises in the form of virtue within the continuum of beings. So just to recap that so it's clear, enlightened activities we should understand as both the expression from the Buddha, as well as the arisal of virtue that comes in dependence on that expression of the Buddha, that arisal of virtue in the continuum of ordinary beings. That too is the arisal of the enlightened activities of the Buddhas in the continuum of us ordinary beings. So this then is what is meant by the excellent qualities of the Buddha's enlightened activities from these two differing perspectives, from the issuer of the enlightened activities and the other path, ordinary being in whom it arises. These are the excellent qualities of the Buddha's enlightened activities. So this the way to understand the excellent qualities of the Buddha's enlightened activities is as the resultant activity of the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. So the Buddha's, and those resultant qualities are expressed by the Buddhas and arise in the continuum of their objects of care, suffering beings. So therefore, the Buddha has qualities of mind, as we saw this morning and last night, that of great compassion and exalted knowing. And when this is expressed in terms of the wish to be of benefit, that is an expression of the mental enlightened activities of the Buddha, as well as being qualities of the Buddha's mind. So it can be called both. And then when the Buddha emanates bodies to engage with beings, those bodies then have the various qualities of the bodies of a Buddha, and they are also a resultant expression of the qualities of the Buddha. So therefore there would be physical enlightened activities. And then the activity of teaching. So the speech of the Buddha has the qualities we looked at last time, but the act of teaching is also an enlightened a verbal enlightened activity of the Buddha. So therefore, there's a sequence of with the enlightened activity being a result of the various qualities of the Buddha. And when one looks at the individual qualities of the Buddha, as they are being utilized to be of benefit, they can be called either the quality of the Buddha or an expression of the enlightened activity of the Buddha. So they can be referred to as both. Then, in terms of the recipient of this illustration of the teachings of the Buddha, to the extent that the recipient hears and reflects and meditates on the teachings, those qualities of the Dharma will arise in the mind. And what is arising in the mind is the qualities of the Dharma, and it is the enlightened activities of the Buddha arising in the mind. So there's two then. Here we should, in terms of the qualities arising in the mind of non-Buddhas, these two we should understand as being the enlightened activities of Buddhas and a resultant quality of the various activities of the Buddha.
다 틀려 연대데 상교 코론 줄라 요래 알아서 줄라 요대가 니가 되자 돈다 개발되고.
So from this we can understand that the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech and mind that we've looked up to this point, these are found only in the continuum of Buddhas, hence they are such remarkable beings. But their resultant expression of these good qualities, their enlightened activities, these abide in the continuum both of Buddhas and ordinary beings. So turning to the text, the handout at the top of page 123, and in the published book in the middle, page 105. So, He benefits all sentient beings through both the spontaneous and the uninterrupted enlightened activities of his body, speech, and mind.
Sungu yuan tu yuan dene yoba ina da tu yuan zhe yuan qianbei yuan zhe yuan dene yoba ina na sangyi gi xian zhou samjian gi duan kan de sigo le se de da kan de gu song tu song gi duan kan de sigo le se de gu song tu gi chin le se duan zhe ba le ga le ma zhe xue shen mo zhe le ga de xie ge o dene jin ko le ga kan de sigo le sa jiao le ba zhe zhe din na zhe dang an zhe zhe ba sangyi gi zhe ba kan de sigo le se chin le se zhe ba kan de sigo le la de de li 제바 제탄 님체니 수월 체 륜규 주비게 권에 륜규 주바다 균매체베 권에 지거레스 륜규 주비 권에다 안 륜규 주바다 균매체바 니기 안 셈절라 셈자 탐절라 판도 지거레스 제바 제탄 될래야 자와 제탄 될래 니 륜규 주비 권에 지고 륜규 주바다 균매체베 권에 지거레스.
Looking at this first sentence, he benefits all sentient beings through both the spontaneous and uninterrupted enlightened activities of his body, speech, and mind. So the qualities of a Buddha's body, speech, and mind, when expressed to be of benefit to others, they are expressed in terms of work or activity. So we normal everyday language, we talk about work, but here we'd use the word activity. So these activities then, or enlightened activities, have the two qualities of being both spontaneous and secondly, uninterrupted.
도시 고고가 말해서 매발에서 룬유주바레서 배주 상이기 최소야야 제바 간신의 현이决定 제바 심전의 판도 제발이야 즉 배주를 되고 말해서 배주 매발 룬유주바고 배매도 남산도 지네 미치가 자와 가서 심전의 판백을 두고 거래지 배주를 되고 룬유주바서 배주를 마되바 상이기 안에 현된 지고래서 The
first type of enlightening activity, that is spontaneous, or spontaneous enlightened activities. So this expresses the quality that no effort is required. The Buddhas spontaneously engage in enlightened activities. So this is very different from ourselves. For example, we have to make efforts, think and plan and so forth. Whereas for Buddhas, it's spontaneous. Where there's need, they appear. So this quality of enlightened activities being spontaneous means that it is immediate. No effort is required.
판도 저 제바들이야 균체바요 말했어. 근데 내가 딜리제 내가 딜레 맞아봐다. 아니 심전 대술에 판도제 심전 대술에 판도 맞아. 되네 가요 균체바요 말. 제사다 이디 이내 심전의 판도 지고를 마도 심전이야. 아니 제바체야디 균체바스요 말해. 균매체바 지고래서.
The enlightened activities that are uninterrupted means that it is continuous, that the Buddhas engage and benefit. It's not that they, at certain times they are active and at other times they're not, or that they at certain times can help these beings and at other times those beings. There is no interruption to their enlightened activities, which are also spontaneous.
공로다 또 배절을 띄고 있나 네 윤체에 영향을 그래서 배주지도 배주의 제도 곧 직마신 받아 되네요나 안다디시 투사 말해서 자기로 같이 되네게 배주를 띄어봐다 되네게 또 공로 배주를 띄어봐 있나 는 윤체에 춘세바 윤체 시바와 그래서 다 균미체와 배주제 송바디 가르선에 최신의 제바디 상기기 신는 제바델라 배매 훈루브레스 배바 배주 제고고 말 배매 가능시나 제투에 차도 그래서 제사다 균침 균매체가 용거래서 돼.
So the enlightened activities of a Buddha are so unlike non-Buddhas. We have to make effort. Buddhas do not need to make effort. They can, and not only do they not need to make effort, in other words, they can be spontaneous, they can help others in a manner that's uninterrupted. It's never a case of them needing to ponder what would be best here, or let's do some research at what's a good solution. That would be an interruption. And likewise, in terms of hindering spontaneity or spontaneous intervention, then it's not like the Buddha needs to think about what should be done or prioritize. The Buddhas can help spontaneously in an uninterrupted manner.
간절히 된다라다 상기기 심증에 주된 제나 제바들라 네 제비갑라 네 배출을 뛰고 말해서 네 배출을 뛰고 말해서 하시대 한진에 나 심증이 판도 제바들라 균체바 균해요 봐 남이야 균매체바 균체고래 해서지 된다디 송도 하나.
So these two maybe aspects or types of enlightened activities are that the enlightened activities are spontaneous. There is no need for prior planning and reflection, and they are uninterrupted. There's no queue of those that the Buddhists can get to. Their help is uninterrupted and spontaneous. Lama Tsongkhapa continues, insofar as a disciple is fit for guidance, it is impossible for the sage not to give that trainee what is excellent and pull him or her out of trouble. kowe dunga le 타예게 탑람다 아니지 강한 세게 탑람 디기주비에 탑람 푼순 초바 마상와 매바디 마제바시데 마송바 요 말해서다 마송바 요 말해서 근데 구발에 마장바 요 말해서데 데니기 마송네 냠는 제제 아니 야 강한래 마타바데 요 말해서 차상 탈들이 타와 용거래서 마타바 용거 말 구발에 마장바 메스 구발에 세도한데 베네 코베 나송래 타야 강한래 세야되세요와 데니 마 세야될 데레 마장바 요 말해서 So this second sentence, insofar as a disciple is fit for guidance, that is the key part there. Because this indicates what we already understand, that in order to be able to, for example, receive teachings, a number of conditions are required. If those conditions have not been accumulated, even if there's a teacher willing and capable to guide, the conditions from the side of the students are not cultivated, they cannot engage with the teachings. They may not be able to come, or they may not be able to concentrate, or to even hear what is being said. Insofar as a disciple is fit for guidance, it is impossible for the sage not to give that trainee what is excellent and pull him or her out of trouble. Furthermore, this key part in the sentence is this first clause, insofar as a disciple is fit for guidance. Because this points to the development of qualities, or to express it differently, openness and receptiveness on the side of the student. Independence on that, the Buddha can give. Because the Buddha has no limitation from the Buddha's side in terms of providing what is excellent. But there is limitation on the student's side for being able to be receptive to that excellent guidance. Likewise, there's no limitation from the Buddha's side to be able to pull the student out of trouble or decline. But there is a limitation in terms of the conditions accumulated by the students, in terms of what they will be receptive to, what they will be open to, what they will, amount of effort they themselves will put in. So again, the limitation here is on the student side, in terms of how fit they are for guidance.
남가 요마다 고치 미루어래 가서 그 다음에 봐 셰베네 고 안에 판도 요마다 제자데 팀 미루어래 제자데니 코로나야 다음에 봐서야지 지시나 얘기 여바당 코로나야 두스 판도 여바디 캠바나 상예 킹고로 캠바인자 되려야 다음에 남셔대 안 다음에 남셔대도 곧 안에 제사 나 다도 주바지베 다신디 녀모바레 디방고레 디님보 다음에 봐 공고레 세집에 다음에 봐 도별로 공고레세 두스팅여도 콜야 되바 여바 콜라 디니기 셰바나 코 냠는 지위바 콜라 판도 여바인자 되려마 지중월 콜마수 대송여도 코로나 냠는 지위도 간섬질이 안 코위게 다신 방지 코위 동안을 조용으로 지당 구발에 자와 인디나시아도 개와 치마 케밀링이들라 개와 치마 된다라야 아니 주름 송고 서버 공고에서 시에메르와다 내가서 개와 치마서 요 말에서 이 시에 케밀링 지사다 디 코로나 찜중월다 개와 치마기 네 동안선에 타르지 야 안에 디 원dio 고환 지에게 탑름 때에도 rungo 말아 과된 그 킬링고 말아 그 냠네 지고 말아 제 판도 매발 제가 되니기 코로나 때문에 코에다 킬링 그 냠네 지에게 되니 유여바나 산이 될마 때 아니 원dio 공화성 동안에 타르게 탑름 때 니네 검주 냠네 지에 돼 냠네 제바 되네 그방화성 동안에 봐줘요 그래서 원도수 뭐다 되나 베로시 베센로 슈베네
A Buddha, being free of all faults, is able to guide each being perfectly in accordance with that being's own disposition and inclination. So therefore, a Buddha will know to whom they need to talk about their being a self, as well as to whom they can present selflessness. So where a disciple is limited in their receptiveness to teachings on selflessness, the Buddha is restricted in what would be beneficial to communicate. So if the student would respond particularly negatively to a presentation on selflessness, the restriction in terms of what can be presented is not on the side of the Buddha. The Buddha is able to present selflessness flawlessly, but the student is not a suitable vessel. A student will respond negatively. So therefore the Buddha will struggle to be able to guide that being right now, to pull that being right now from the suffering realms of samsara. Similarly, if a student is closed to even the possibility of there being future lives, they just believe in this one life now, that means they are not particularly open and receptive to much of the teachings of the Dharma, which presuppose an acceptance of future lives. So therefore, again, the limitation is not on the side of the Buddha, but the causes that student has created means that they are quite limited in terms of the guidance that they are open and receptive to. We should be very clear here that from the side of the perfected being, they can guide all beings, and they can guide beings in accordance with the receptiveness of that being. But whether we are guided in the most suitable way is dependent on our own receptiveness, what causes we ourselves have accumulated. This then impacts on the how rapidly we can be pulled out of trouble or decline. In other words, pulled out of the suffering realms of samsara. And Lama Tsongkhapa concludes, thus it is stated that through his actions, he definitely does everything that is necessary. Necessary here, it's more of all that is appropriate. Appropriate in terms of what the student is receptive to. Because presenting something that the student would rebel against, that is not appropriate. But whatever the student is receptive to, in that way, the Buddhas will help.
Andirwada Sanyi ki, Jeza Sanyi Chu Sunya di Sosugi Rawangi Sungo Mares, Jeza Duje Kamda Mebale Tunde Sungo Res, Jeza Sanyi Sung Mashimba Mare di Ine, Go Duje Kamda Tunjin Mani, Pando Yuban the Sungo, Qualition, Pando Mena, and soon Bukoba Dugo Marwa, Jeza Sanyi Sunya di. 지난 베나가족의 좀 더 마와나는 세미네 산이 백가시 제라 마와다 도데 바다 따위 남자카가 송요로 바다 산이 송야 돼. 지자 도시네 대설야 이제 고도 디때네 코론절에 디디바 코론절에 켈린 투고 코론절 제 투고요 봐 이제 코로 중화 이제 디마데 다 차과 침배 최로电샤바나 남상 혼주기다 로로 추고마 제 투고 말 중고마 이제 도서 마송바 마티바 샤고로 봐. 지자 되네 이제 안디나 시당 저기미 나지게 따위 남샤다 되네게 케멜레 베네 양 코로들이야 잠니지 냠나 제야기 내려야 된나 셰 송야 rum바이나 내려야 잠니지 냠나 제야기 다 도시 따위 남샤 고마선다 잠니제 샤라 판도시고 베기 되네게 남샤 송지 냠나 제바데 제사 기워 외어 봤을 코로나야 간에 외신 참바 코로나야 디시에나 코로나 판도 외어바다 뉘 디네지레 셰바네 코로나 판도 외어바 제사 뒤다 넘버 군도 간에 숨고 매 상이 킹겨 봐자 제가 외신 참바 뒤 참바 내가 참바 아니 코로나 최 참바 코로나 도시네 코로나 되니기 기워 외어바시데 코로나 판도 제어바 차산 도시네 상이게 마제바 요 말에스 제가 판도 제기리에스 당한저로 보시나 안 판도 제 외바로 시나데 아딩아요사 나 디스미도세하다 안 요구도세하다 안 나기도세하다 디요사 말에세 바샤샤 용구로하다 상이를 디큐네요 말에스 제자다 되네 자다 안줄이 하까브레야 안줄로면다 어디 외바 있는 안아서 시어 숭 두제들의 시 rum어 외바 있나야 나 중에 시 마셔도 어디 네 시신면도스네 고다세 샤샤로 와지 제가 상계를 되네요 말했어 제가 두스다 디링 네시어 디링아 데플로라 삼로 당로면도 시에 면도스는 간주 디요로 와다 제가 디 상계를 디요 말네 그 륜유 베메 룬주 베절 되고 말 륜유 주바래 제가 게디나 도시네 송을 해야 돼.
Here we see a further restriction placed on the Buddha. Because what we've heard thus far is the Buddha has perfected their good qualities through completely eradicating all faults, therefore has an omniscient consciousness, knows all phenomena. But despite that, as we saw earlier, the Buddha is also without any control, because another way to translate this without any control is without free will. So the Buddha is also without free will in terms of not having, it being controlled by their great compassion. But here we see a further way that the Buddha is without free will or without any control, and that is the restriction placed on their enlightened activities by the suitability of the, or receptiveness of those that the Buddha is interacting with, or the disposition and inclination of the students the Buddha is interacting with. That impedes what a Buddha can do. So it's not that the Buddha can do whatever the Buddha chooses to do. The Buddha is restricted. The will of the Buddha is restricted and therefore not free in terms of what would be appropriate, what would be most beneficial. The Buddha is, though, because of the omniscient consciousness, able to guide beings perfectly in accordance with the complexity of their karmic backgrounds and individual spiritual dispositions. So the Buddha can perceive that directly, and therefore can perceive to whom to guide through the Mahayana Dharma, and who to guide through another presentation, or in terms of the philosophical tenets, what would be most appropriate given this person's individual karmic background and spiritual disposition. So there is a limitation on the free will of the Buddha. And to some, this limitation will be therefore expressed by the Buddha as not teaching a philosophical view, a view on reality, but rather guiding others in the cultivation of virtue through cultivating minds of love and compassion, and not talking about how phenomena exist in reality, whether there is a self or not. So the Buddha is not free to choose to teach selflessness to everyone, but the Buddha is restricted by the individual karmic backgrounds of beings. But we should know, though, that the Buddha will always do whatever is most suitable, most appropriate for each individual in terms of their current state of spiritual development. And furthermore, from these two types of enlightened activities we saw earlier, spontaneous enlightened activities and uninterrupted enlightened activities, the Buddha is always at the ready to help. And not just at the ready as in the sense of waiting back, but is always engaging in accordance with the capacity of those that the Buddhas are engaging with. So there is no, from the side of the Buddha, no fatigue or no lack of wish to help right now, or a lack of knowledge on a particular topic. These are what restrict us, where there'll be certain things we can't really answer, we can't teach, or to say, sorry, I can't answer that, I haven't prepared. Buddhists don't have any of these restrictions. Therefore, they can engage spontaneously and uninterruptedly. The only form of restriction they encounter is the receptiveness from the side of the students. And that receptiveness comes about in dependence on their own karmic backgrounds, their own causes they have created.
Shiva Sanje said that Chue Tam Jung was on the Geba Tarchemba and the Garina doing to what in Chue and then some other low Mongbe that Jinji, low Mambo Mambe Chela did Karichungu and Sanji King and I mean as being also the water Yungur Wata. They can't soon a degree of Hajan Sungo massage. The Neza some Laya Jiggy, then Hansu some Chugo marches as Sanji King I. That can the Karchin Sungo Madi, the Song and Yama Suna degree was some big. And then some knowledge, the Gur water. Then also the road, the Mount, but the universe, the Mount, but the Macanesa. How we not the Kakuna Yena Menage, didn't in the same Dinishila San Gigor, said Dinish you see Dinish San how one of the San Gigres and Lamna Jigru, the Laguna Harina said, and the Kanga Dinish Sigre said, Mahomba Nakana Kanga didn't know but Sanji Kingo didn't, Kemba and the Kanga didn't Yunguri, and the Machi said that the Sona Jigru was some big Anzulia, that didn't summon that Tamji King said, I think there I some big and also some knowledge to what you Sigrua, Yungdua dinner.
So this weekend we've covered some particularly challenging topics. Challenging in terms of they seem quite inconceivable and beyond what we can conceive as possible. So we've heard, although I didn't use the words earlier, but I'll use it now, there is no free will, that we are without any control. So this we've spoken about many times in the past. But I've also spoken about something today that is pointing to that it looks like things are predetermined, in that the Buddha knows what will happen with each of us over the course of many lifetimes to come. And this is quite incomprehensible to us because it's something so very far from our own lived experience that it is difficult to believe. How can the Buddha know what will happen to this continuum in lifetimes to come and know with complete precision? So this is quite difficult to comprehend.
Nyawa Ida Dundo Dindin the Euro, Navy, and Yakam Chip in the Euro said, and this do so Dunga Dindin the Yungors, not so soon Yorada. That is what Denigi Yungor has said. And Denigi, this you did your careless and you did in your mobile, but they didn't have you did Yungor as I did Sun Sarava. 다 모험바나 이나 모험바나 소소게 냠는 데데 제바나 탈베 야로베나 탈바다 탐제 기보고 봐 냠는 데시는 똑바 되는 시리게 디진 똑바 되는 데네 자주면 제부터 그래 데네 자주 셈바 차에 데네 상유 고바체 림바 차사 상유 송샤요 와다 제사 송유하러 다된 아주기 미가 개위 녀몽바 삼는 게바나 딩녀몽바 삼는 데네 시코나 내가 손을 데네 시기게 데레 동아 데네 녀아요래 딜레 슈체 코나 녀와래 기게 데레 동아 데네 데녀 녀와 상예세 데네 장예세 데네 데동아 차사 디스 차사 상이 켄제 먼저 송사와다 송사와래.
Whilst there's a lot in the Dharma that is accessible to us, either directly or either immediately or with some reflection and analysis and study, there is still a lot that is completely obscured to us and is only known to an omniscient consciousness. So, for example, for us, the existence of the lower realms, these aren't something that we perceive, but we've heard already prior to this chapter about the 18 hell realms, the various forms of pretas, and so forth. We've also heard a brief presentation on the causes that lead to rebirth in the lower realms. And we will come to the chapter on karma, which will present that if depending on the cause and the strength of the cause and varying factors, it can lead to one of a variety of suffering experiences, including rebirth in a lower realm. And if it's particularly strong, a rebirth in a hell. If it's less strong as a spirit and less strong than that, then as an animal, and so forth. So this is all stuff that all topics that we've either covered in some detail or briefly. And these are topics that to our perception are still quite hidden. But so too, in the other direction, the direction of travel we want to go into. We've heard many times about the causes that need to be accumulated that will lead to excellent rebirths. And through those causes being developed in a way that's even stronger, they will lead to the eventual attainment of a mental path and as that is developed, will lead to one's liberation from psychic existence and even to Buddhahood. So all of this has been presented, and these are topics that to us still remain somewhat hidden.
mengi namsha ne chue ta gi ta men tru ta da ri ma ho so sha ba da de ma bo gyuning bo ne ka da ka yung go re ne ri mi do ka ka yung go re ne ri de ne de yo re ne ri de la men chue ta men de ne tru go chue ta de ne se wo re cha san so yo ro da.
The Buddha also taught about, maybe I can express it like this, as more practical applications to deal with hardship in the world, in that the Buddha also taught about medicine to treat ailments, to treat illnesses. So the Buddha taught about a variety of illnesses, as well as giving guidance in terms of medicinally how to treat those those illnesses. So this the Buddha has previously taught, or did previously teach.
That nga zu kere junga nga zu mi ro kyo de chile mo ba na ka ti che kyo mo ba de chile tu su de chile kyo sa yo ko ba to gre se di da song yo ma ba da ma mi kere re ngo ro ya.
And the teachings of the Buddha that we encounter are these general teachings where the Buddha is addressing sentient beings, as opposed to teachings where the Buddha is saying, for you, this is what will happen to you. These are the causes you need to create, otherwise this or that, etc. So we hear teachings in a general manner, as opposed to being about each of us individually.
Kusung tuki chile lenyu lunyu drupche, kusung tuki 구송도 연대 시에들 디월가 대양 두지원이 지중나 특别두제 대 분소다 분소 마제바다 마고바 마장바 매베세지 두지원이와 제산 두지원이 지중나 두지원이 개최의 데니지 연대 된 rum바이나 숭구리에시고와 제사당하는솔 결혼 데니지라 상 얘기를 결혼 뒤지지라 강한 뒤티게서 소에 대한 선바송에 대한 두지원이 전에 rum요 말다데디 만줄 손나디 rum고 말에 팬도에 말에 제자디 숭고 말에 제자지 rum나 데니가 rum와이나 손야로 와다.
To return to the text to what we've just covered, so in the same paragraph that we've been looking at, the second sentence, insofar as a disciple is fit for guidance. This is important now to take to mind, to recall this, that insofar as a disciple is fit for guidance, it is impossible for the sage not to give the trainee what is excellent and pull him or her out of trouble. So this we should be very clear on. We have received the teachings that we have created the causes to receive. Or to express it differently, we receive the teachings that are suitable for us. If there were another form of teaching that we were suitable for, that we would have received too. So here, what is, again, I said earlier, what's been pointed to is that the limitation is not from the side of the Buddha, but is on the side of the vessel, of the side of the student.
결혼 상기배 상예기 민천들의 딜라그리 디 상계 되는지 천되는지 토를 결혼 상기를 해야 돼. 롱된지고를 제가 상예 뭐 롱된지 봐서 제가 디 상예기다 그런 쪽에 직관 쪽에다 태바침병 왕고 기셰벨다 왕고 되는 시도 결혼 마음바나 안에 뒤에 되는 시를 결혼 상기고 뭐 토그래 지자 상기기 천천 맞서는 민되는 지토를 결혼 상기고 뭐 토그래서 결혼 민디 상기가 결혼 민되는 시를 그래서 상기기 롱된지고다 아직 가왕슈비 갑라 능고를 되게 다 롱된 가왕슈비 멤베 갑라 되는 롱된 나야 여러 와다 가왕슈디 갑래 나야 여러 능고를 걸왕 낭다 결혼 마음바다 상기 뒤주실에 결혼 상기기 상기가 결혼 상기 민디라 그래서 장주선바다 룽와딜라 되네 현의 뒤되겐지 튕긴 창되겐지 여러와 룽여도 장주선바 차상을 송거 말봐 되네 튕긴 뉴바되지 룽와셔야지 되네 룽와 주여도 다 될래야 송거다 그런 마음바나 결혼 상기에 상 뒤수 되는지 결혼 상기 그래 뒤수전 되는지 상기 그래 다와인데 되는지 상기 그래 결혼 뒤 상기 버갈 상 결혼이 민으로 스마트나 대신 샤바 되는지라 그래 사실 아니 코로나에 되는지 용 그래 사실 어두스 송거 마음을 못 돼야지 다 상기 롱된 바시고 되네.
But there are those who are suitable to be given explicit indication of their future progression. So some bodhisattvas are suitable, and at the time of receiving initiation, they will be given a prediction of their enlightenment. They will be told, at this particular time, you will become enlightened. This is the name you'll have as a Buddha. This will be the retinue that you have. So a prediction of enlightenment or a prophecy will be given to certain bodhisattvas who are suitable to receive such guidance.
안디니 자다 상예게다 코로나제다 롱와이나 송그리 세데 디르와다 롱와 세데 소소게 뇌 롱와 수셰예 셰나 지드겐기 데니기 뇌 롱와이나 마도 송그리에스 데니 마송가 요마레 세데 디르와다.
So what we have translated here as insofar as a disciple is fit, so insofar as they are fit. So this fit is what's translated here as fit is usually translated as appropriate or suitable. The translation is fine, but you'll usually hear the word appropriate or suitable. So to the extent that the student has developed the causes, that they are appropriate for a certain level of guidance, that is what the Buddhas will spontaneously and uninterruptedly provide to them. So this is actually a key term with a lot of significance behind it. This word suitable or appropriate or fit.
Da di shole ya ane bodo yu Geshe bodo yu she ne garson warasne yang samna yi Geshe dang yu je dao do song ne jinlap jungs.
Now, continuing with the text, and Lama Tsongkhapa quotes Potawa, if you reflect on the Buddha's qualities again and again, your conviction strengthens and your mind stream becomes purer, which gives rise to more blessings.
Di gyumtende ya da di sing azu gu yuan de sung yu de tu yuan de di du se ya ne ya no sam da wen da ane yi xie cher xie yi xie jie xie dang se yi xie de shu cher xie gu res jie sa gu yuan de sung gu yuan de tu yuan de le tu qian bei yuan de ne zhe yuan de di pa du sam da xi de hao guo yuan de de le ya ne yi xie de shu cher ru jie xie ru re shu cher ru res shu cher ru de ane rang gi yu jie da du song res ne de ne sa su su ge le gewa di shu che che rugo re yu gewa di shu che che rugo de da do se de ga san su su gi dibad ma chung chung rugo re so yu je da do song se de nyamlen ji ge wi ri de ya ni ba che che rugo ane da so de ga me ba cha ge de se ne di wi ri de nyo mo ba di wi ri ma shu chung chung song go re de ne song de san yi jin yi la ba re so jin lab chung wa de nga so le jin yi la ba chung jin lab chung se 지산 진랍 중화를 생각을 주길래 디버 충로도 진랍 중화를 진랍래 다 진랍래 디 진랍 중화를 아주 주길래 진랍 중화를 했어.
If you reflect on the Buddha's qualities again and again, so this is the reflection on recognizing our yearning for freedom from the sufferings of samsara, and that the qualities of the Buddhas, the qualities of the three jewels, such as the Buddha's body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities, the three jewels all have the capacity to guide me to attain a state of freedom. Throughout these repeated reflections, our trust in the three jewels grow, the blessings we receive from the three jewels grow. So there's a relationship here. As our trust or faith in the qualities of the three jewels, in other words, as our refuge in the three jewels grow, the blessings we receive from them grow. And what does this term blessing mean? So here it's stated. Your conviction strengthens and your mind stream becomes purer. So the conviction strengthens. What this means is our trust in the qualities of the three jewels. This is growing, which is another way of expressing we are creating virtue, because it's not just that we are reflecting on the qualities of the three jewels, but our faith or trust in the three jewels is growing. That is a virtuous mind. So it's not just a mere intellectual exercise where you're running off a list in your mind, but your heart is opening, your trust is growing. That is a virtuous mind. So this then is the reception or the receiving of blessings of the Buddha. And to the extent we accumulate virtue, to that extent, so there's a comparative, to that extent, non-virtue is purified. That too is a blessing of the Buddhas. So this term blessings of the Buddha's blessings of the three jewels. This comes about, what it is meant by blessings is that we are accumulating virtue and purifying non-virtue. That is the receiving of blessings. So just mention briefly the etymology of this word, blessing. So the Tibetan is as the two particles, the two parts, jin and lab. So the two syllables. So the first syllable, that of jin. So it's a different word, but the meaning is we hear elsewhere in Nupa, which is power or capacity. So this refers to one's, in this case, the three jewels. It could be the Buddha, it could be one's Lama, the recognition of their power or capacity to positively influence you. Now, this positively influence your mind. So that's the first part of the word blessing, jin. The second, lab. This means to change or transform, and that's in relation to our mind. So we're turning to those whom we have trust and faith that they have, now the jin, the power or capacity to help us change our mind, the love. And what does it mean to change or transform our mind? Accumulate virtue and thereby purify non-virtue. So therefore, when you ask yourself, or when you're making prayers and there's an expression there of receiving or requesting blessings, what the meaning is, you recognize that person or that being has the power or capacity to influence you, to inspire you, to transform your mind. How? The accumulation of virtue. And the very turning for blessings is accumulating virtue. Botwa continues. When you have gained certain knowledge about this, you will go for refuge from the depths of your heart. Then, if you merely train in the precepts, whatever you do will become a practice of the Buddha Dharma. And when you have gained certain knowledge about this. So this is referring to your mind of protecting refuge, being stable, and being stable because one has reflected well on the qualities of the three jewels, recognizing that they have the capacity to guide one so that one can gain as protection from suffering. So when you have gained a certain knowledge about this, your refuge will be heartfelt. As it says here, you will go for refuge from the depths of your heart. So this means you are completely open and receptive to the guidance of the Dharma. Whatever guidance you receive, you embrace it. And that is experienced as ensuring that one's mind is always in accordance with the Dharma. Then Potawai continues, then if you merely train in the precepts, so the precepts can be presented in many ways. So it doesn't necessarily refer to the refuge precepts, but precepts such as that it's imperative not to bring harm, so ethical restraint, that it's imperative to be of benefit, generosity, it's imperative to be patient in the face of hardships, and it's imperative to develop the skill of enthusiastic perseverance. So these are some of the precepts. And whatever you do will become a practice of the Dharma. Because all that one does then, or whatever one is doing, one is being aware of one's mind and ensuring that one's mind is in accordance with ethics, generosity, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, and so forth. In this way, all your expressions, of physical, verbal expressions, are coming from minds of the Dharma. And then everything what one does is a practice of the Buddha Dharma.
Dini kewa cha dewa kaso kunlong jamdro she jamdro ge da sanji gi dipataya la cha cha wa no kora se song de ba sa de le ya song de di la len ta chang kora ko de je sa dini ko de ka lu kora ko tro de ka bla kunlong kewa yo re jamdro ye de kewa sa ko ke wi chue chi ko ro da kora ko chue chi ko ro ba la di men ba je na zu du ne 수부 당고야 다디 지축 다 나온 기주 줘도 되는데 그 류지에 차리마도 개와사고 말아 고라고라 집어봐 이러와 고라고라 집어디제디 직디 점르체 점르게 랍자라 롭되게 삼비 군에 랑제 고라고야도 네 개와사고래 제래 안에 니메메 직디 당한적 되네 삼가하면 봐제 고라고바네 류지로 자직 차고마도 개와사야 상이 최지바 말이다 고라고바디 직바시 직디 최지고 직디 최지고 말해라 최지바 가라서네 고 점르 접소를 건조서 접소를 점수 전에 되는 점르게 토네 점르 랍제 다 되네시네 대 최디나로야 나 상계다 전선 봐 탐지 슈유 상계 매바제 될이야네 대비 군이라서 고고도 네 개와사고래 제르와나.
This too then should be taken to heart, because it's entirely in accordance with what you've heard so many times. That whether we do something, whatever we do, whether it's virtuous or not, depends on our mind. Whether it's in accordance with the Dharma or not depends on our mind, more than the activity itself. So we have this magnificent stupa here. And whether one's circumambulations are activities of the Dharma or not, depends on one's motivation. If one's been sitting all day and the body is a bit sore, you think, I need to move, and then one goes and does some kora, one is really just doing some exercise. But if one has been sitting all day and one's body is a bit sore, but in dependence on one sitting all day, one has a determination to gain freedom from the sufferings of samsara. And one has a present in one's mind a deep and abiding respect for the Buddhas. Then, as an expression of homage, one performs circumambulation. One's body is being exercised, but one is engaging in an act of the Dharma. So this is important. It's important that one understands this, and understands that such a motivation needs to be sincere, not just a mere expression of words for it to be a Dharma activity.
ane Geshe Thubten Rabten jisan sangye denege ya sangye ane khenpe yunden zewe yunden nibe yunden dege sam dadu chen sam hane yando dang yongdu dele ya ane yiche ma so na shukcher zhe ya da rangi ane jige yu dadu che ya de je ane jamre de tempo jamre de tempo ji yong jamre ya bo ji go res je jamre ya bo di kun di thone da ngan je jige Kemrika Labja, 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 Gawa, Java, Jubion, Chasana, Sanyi, Chesheba, Chagores, the Nani body di Sungu, di Kangele, Dusires.
What Potwa is encouraging us in here is to reflect again and again on the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, as well as enlightened activities, and do so again and again, so that one's conviction, one's faith in the three jewels grow. In particular, with this understanding that they can provide one with protection. Therefore, I will rely on the guidance that I receive. This opening of oneself is accumulating virtue. This means one is receiving the blessings of the Buddha. It will also mean one will find it much easier to turn away from what keeps one from engaging in the Dharma, and rather to embrace the Dharma itself.
And ma ogo sanji ki kemba la mo ma no sho zamdo ya misi sung sos na ma no sho shigi dalo chola ne chupchak me nga shi sena de bolgi ro den andu sine sung do.
Potwa continues, we do not value the Buddha's exalted knowing even as much as we value an accurate fortune teller. If an accurate fortune teller tells you, I know there will be no bad luck for you this year, you walk away happy and comfortable.
지게 야고래 직 삼거든 이나 나는 저게 지금로바들에 못하게 못빼 모티브요래 세셔로 디 연는 자면 안데 제가 댕기고 말했어 뭐 베네 상이 켐바라 모노쇼 점도야 미지와세 지고 말했어 다 모노쇼 못 템부 티부슈어서 콜이야 쇼 지구르지 제다 이시제다 상이게 손에 될 디지게 퀄리티 이치제 바나지가 저기 이시제 두고 말했어요.
What Potwa is pointing out is that we do not value the Buddha's exalted knowing, but not just exalted knowing. His other qualities are mental qualities such as great compassion, but also the qualities of his speech and body. So all the qualities of the Buddha we do not value as much as a fortune teller with a good reputation. That our trust in what a fortune teller will tell us, a fortune teller who has a good reputation, our trust in that exceeds our trust in the Buddha Dharma.
그래서 가르려면 나 뭐쟁이들이 다 뭐지 잡지 다로 결혼을 줍셔요 말 다로 결혼을 바시 민두 세지 라벤다 다딩이디 뭐 잡지도 뭐나 디딩도 제사 결혼 다로 바시 민두 세데 강아 영사 말 세벤다 아니 내버리고 줘서 쌤 기블라라지 갈라라지 뒤그래서 늘려디 오지 아니 다다나 디딩이다 가르스는 알이야 강아다 지금 말하선 모바이기 랍송아스 진짜도 콜이야 이세로 시우르지고 제제 안디 이시지고래서.
So if you go to someone that has a good reputation and you ask for a divination and you get a very welcome reply that there will be no bad luck for you this year, you'll be thrilled. You'll probably leave there with a big smile on your face, tell all your friends, I have a good year ahead of me.
나디에 뭐잡근데야 달로니 디츠피 디마지 세나 베네줍 아니 마줍나 디게 세와 니 마줍 냠네 로미디와지.
And Potwa continues, if she says, this year there will be great misfortune, do this, don't do that, you will try hard to accomplish it. And if you do not accomplish it, you will think, I did not accomplish what she told me to do, and your mind will be anxious.
가르쳐가 디 배주신 지기래 두그래 배주는 룹 디 마둡나 데네기 그 제시교 세야디 제주사디 제에게 맞추바나 소설이 아다딩이 제마서 빼마서 나 가르쳐버렸으면 배 샘체시로 마기바 쉬우시 되고 그래제래
Receiving the bad news like this, that you have obstacles ahead, but being presented with solutions, you'll immediately leave there with a determination. I need to organize these pujas or whatever else one has been told to do. And you'll set about doing so with diligence. And if for whatever reason one is unable to do so, that will disturb your mind greatly, being anxious, thinking, I have not done what I should have done to avert catastrophe.
나도 소라다 뭐냐간 지금 뭔 자원디다 결혼을 달로 지게 줍차다 바제 하나 민두센 소소로 대랑하지 다디 결혼을 바제도디 잡된 데는 제고선 남상 딜리지 남상 줍 데네 줍마도 다등이 잡된 줍마서 제마 제라마서선 다지 셈제라진데 되고도 와서 나가도 도중도 와서지 이제 숨벌다.
So the meaning in brief here is that this shows how one's trust in for example, a fortune teller, someone who does divinations of various types, our trust in them can be such that we will either be joyous at what they say, or we'll frantically set about following their advice, if they so advise us to do so.
다 상기기에서 디단 디주보 셰제발라 로켈람 마로나 로미데와 홍암 최내 대개 셰바데 다다 유두기 대수게 뚝 미둡 디축 제괴 설대 상기여 송 레수 버네 랑시 지게 토도 좋아 인송데스 마다 냠가와 잠레 추와 민바이나 이 나도 로네 십도 따나 신도 다와나오스
And Potawar continues, if the Buddha says, do this and that, accomplish this and that, do you take it on? If you do not accomplish it, does your mind become anxious? To claim the teachings say that, but owing to present circumstances, I cannot do it right now, so I must do this instead, is to ignore the Buddha's advice and proceed on the basis of your discernment. Then Lama Tsongkhapa continues, just as Potawar says here, if we turn our mind inward and examine carefully, we will recognize that it is so true, that it is so true that our normal attitude, one of trusting others' mere words and being content without discernment, is nothing but delusion.
jamroje jimbenyam chudin subenyam chundese te sangye du su chegore she sungyo de didan digi dan dijubo kyoran di jegor din jegore anu gom jagore de jegor soya di jebala lokelam kyoran ichegi dues kyoran ichegi dues sangye di jesya di 제자도 그런 모자는 그런 잡된 디저걸 그런 남사 지기도 왔어. 그걸 이지기도 지기로 왔어. 다 상지기 결혼을 디제 제스 디콤르제 디냠는 디저걸 써야 돼. 결혼게 르게기도 이체기도 했어. 되네 마줍나 이체는 결혼 남사 디 지기로 베스. 지금 누아서 그러다. 제자 마줍나 로 믿어 옹엄서 되게 상지 순셔바도 결혼 제마도바다 오다등에 제마선 빼사선 로 믿어와 용구도 했어. 용구 믿어 와서 그러다. 제자 되네자 되네자 뭐 제가 되게 돼 샵된 결혼 추부 강아 되네 체계래 결혼 샵된 디지오라선 남사 고시바들 남사 샵된 제 말은 빼 땅에 제라면서 빼 사선선 빼 심리 지기도 와서 산이기 디디 제고래 디 마제번에 둥하된데 제가 나선 조래 되네 진진 디기 두그레 손아 될이야 지 아다 산이 수바서 인지미지 남사 제게 되바 기금도 와서 제사 남사데 되네 마제베네 셈 어당에 산이 수바디 냠네 지야라마 선스베 심마기와도 용문도 와서 그래 제사 되네 인자 산기에 다 모자한지 결혼 모자한데 이시시엘로 지기도 와서 그래
Potawar is asking us, look at the way you respond to the Dharma teachings you receive, and look at the way you respond to everyday people that you have trust in, and ask yourself, who who do you really place your trust with? So look at the advice you've been given in terms of the meditations to engage in say, precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, and now on refuge. How much of the advice did you take to heart? How much of the advice do you follow, meditating on regularly, cultivating those qualities within? Do you respond with a determination, taking this as personal advice? Does your delay or procrastination bother you much? Especially when you compare to the advice that one receives from just general people in society who you have trust in. Here you need to look carefully. You need to look carefully at whether you really value the advice from the Buddha or not. This is very direct. This is quite confrontational from Potaba, saying, you see, I'm pointing out to you now directly, you haven't yet really thought about the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. And therefore you don't truly appreciate just what you have encountered. Think about this so that you take the advice from the Buddha to heart. Don't let the teachings merely wash over you, but take them to heart, embrace them, and ensure that your mind is always in accord with them.
dunga tadalo kyubi nyuba de kyabne konjo suno yore sebi ichi chia dile yoba nza da sanyo kyu kyoguri sebi ichi tembo chia gyumche kyubi gyumche yebi gyumche samda de guyu yende sungu yende tu yende de yorba sa gyumche dene samda yende yoba da dene ge dunga tadale kyubi ge kyoguri seadi kyoguri kyogumarasin kyoguri kyubi gyumche garasene ngazo semja sanji kyula semja 탐절에 니리메 두 세와치 뭐 yoba inza 근데 아주게 요구리 해야지. 노삼다. 다 소수용원에 다리 디셔봐도 소수용원에 당하는 소소라는 게 대바도 되녀게 듬바 여바 있나 산이게 소소를 남든 취마서 봐. 자기는 요 말이에요. 마서 봐요 말 송아대. 근데 배면 흔들순 거래서 배바면 배설면 돼. 송아도 윤마체고 송아도 용구래. 제가 소수기다 되네 자 산이게 취需에 되네 여바디 소수용원에다 대바 다나 안 지게 야 안 되니 좀 배수시하고 계신 분이 사스티스 거라다. 또 인보된.
We've covered quite a lot this weekend, but I encourage you in the fortnight before we meet again to reflect on the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities, so as to develop one's trust in the Buddha, to recognize that the Buddha is suitable to turn to for protecting refuge, because this is an indispensable prerequisite to cultivate the Dharma deep within, to let go of all that confuses and deludes us and distracts us, and embrace what is important. Moreover, when reflecting on the qualities of the enlightened activities of the Buddha, be very aware that the Buddha is always engaging with us, always engaging with suffering beings, and does so spontaneously and uninterruptedly. The only restriction is from our side, our receptiveness. So therefore, to the extent that we open ourselves and make ourselves receptive, we will be able to receive the guidance and the blessings of the Buddha. So this is important, and I encourage you to train yourself, because whilst the mind may often seem quite chaotic and undisciplined, can be transformed into paths of the Dharma by integrating the knowledge that you receive here through reflecting on it. And whilst it is difficult at first, by becoming accustomed to it, it will become ever easier. And in this way, the teachings will become more natural to you, become very much part of who you are, part of your mind. So I encourage you to take this advice, cultivate it within. Okay, then thank you. We can conclude here for the weekend. Thank you.